Well, we're here to discuss the tsunami debris. Let me try that one again. Tsunami debris task force that we've set up today. We've been working on a coordinated response to the debris issue since, I guess, November. Really ramped up in February and March. We've been working with an interagency group that's coordinated with local governments, local agencies, federal agencies, our tribal partners along the coast. We've had a tremendous response from volunteer groups and NGOs as well. And what we're doing today really is formalizing that response plan and appointing General Caldwell, who will serve as the head of the Tsunami Debris Task Force. We have three major objectives in doing this. The first one is to make sure that we have a well-developed incident response for debris that washes up on our shores. There are really three parts of that. First, we're relying on beachgoers who happen to be out on the Oregon beaches. We've provided, where's our little map over here? We've got solve bags distributed along the coast, as well as dumpsters and places to pick up that debris. We have a quick response teams through a group called the Oregon Marine Debris Partnership that involves a solve and surf rider of the coastal haulers, a group of NGOs and folks who are actually going to help us with larger debris should that come up, and then the Department of Parks with their staff and rangers will be on duty as well. The second part of this is having a coordinated communication strategy. So we have a 211 number that people can call. It will be activated by 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. You'll actually get a real person between 8 and 6 recording over the evening, and you call 211 and they can direct you to the appropriate agency for response. Obviously, if it appears to be a true emergency, you can still call 911, but we're trying to direct most of this traffic for non-emergent issues around this to the 211 number. The third issue is we recognize that we're funding this right now within existing agency budgets and relying largely on volunteers and the goodwill of people along the coast. We're going to need additional resources. We were just discussing earlier that if all the anticipated debris were to arrive on the coastline at once, it would be qualify immediately for a federal disaster, and federal resources would flow through FEMA. This doesn't meet the characterization of a normal response through FEMA. So we're working with our congressional delegation, with our partners in California, Washington, Hawaii, and Alaska to get some federal resources out here as soon as we can. So I just wanted to make sure that Oregonians understand that we are on top of this. We have an incident response program in effect. We have a single point of responsibility, General Caldwell, who General Reese will introduce in just a moment, and a 211 number people can call to get information about how we approach the cleanup. So before we go to your questions, let me introduce General Caldwell, General Reese to introduce General Caldwell.
Good. It's my honor here to introduce my Deputy Director, Brigadier General Mike Caldwell. As you know, the Oregon Military Department, the Oregon Office of Emergency Management were merged a couple of years ago. General Caldwell is absolutely the right person for this job. He has intimate knowledge of local and county government. He has been working at the state agency level for over 20 years. He knows all of these agency heads and works with them constantly. He's been our interim director of emergency management for almost 2 years, and he knows this area like the back of his hand. So it's my great pleasure to introduce my deputy, Mike Caldwell. Sir.
Thanks, sir. Welcome, everybody. Thank you very much, Governor. Appreciate the opportunity. On cue. Appreciate that.
Debris washed in there.
Yeah, I was actually looking for a piece of stick in their mouth, but first off, I want to tip my hat to the agencies that have dealt with this problem up to this point, particularly the Parks Department, DEQ, ODFW. We've got a good partnership formed. We've actually began meeting with our state partners and federal partners in November of last year, anticipating this, thanks to the good work of our federal partners letting us know this is what's going to happen. So we've had good communication. What we haven't done as well is probably communicate internally. We've done well. Externally, we haven't done as well, and we're going to fix that. Governor McCall once said that Oregon is a special place, and it is a special place, and we all know that, and Oregonians value their environment, and they value the fact that they live and work and play in a very special place on this planet. My job in this circumstance is going to be to coordinate with all of our partners, deconflict any issues, remove impediments that may confront us, and keep the public informed onto what we are doing and how we are doing it. I think that it's a fairly simple task. It's somewhat like herding cats, but I think in the big scheme of things, we're going to be able to produce to the public a plan that we have drafted right now. It's in draft form, and we're going to produce that to them, plus the outreach. And I think got some of these handouts that I'm going to give to the media, and certainly I think we have some more in the back of the room, but we'll certainly make these available to you so people have handouts, they have internet, and they have access to the 211 number to get their questions asked and answered, and also inform us on something we may not be familiar with. So I think all in all, right now, the start is been underway, and I think formalizing it and given and the governor having direct access to me 24/7, that we will be able to deal with these issues as they arise. This is not like normal disasters, as the governor mentioned. Normal disaster, all of this debris would have ended up in one place at one time, would have created a whole lot of interest in the nation, and we would have had the regular systems deal with it. The systems don't deal with a disaster that starts in June and may go on for 2 to 3 years. So that's the piece that we're going to be working on with our federal partners. So all in all, it's an opportunity to help all of our people and our environment and keep our state what it is and has been forever. So thank you very much, and I'd be happy to take any questions that you may have.
General, it may be stating the obvious, but what's the danger of not doing anything and letting this stuff come ashore?
Well, I think the first danger, obviously, is it's going to make the beaches non-habitable for our visitors, our citizens. And I think in the long term, when you have this kind of debris just continue to stack up, you create other problems that could be invasive species attached to them that nobody's dealing with. And it could be just simply make the beaches unusable, and that isn't at all what we want to have our citizens. Our citizens don't want that, we believe, and so we're going to do everything we can to clean it up.
But we're not worried about like anything. This is a stupid question, I know, but somebody's got to ask it. Radioactivity or anything, that kind of danger.
The risk for nuclear radioactive material is very, very low. If you recall, the tsunami hit, everything moved out to the ocean, and then after that was when we had the nuclear reactor problems. So the chance of anything being from this debris coming in is highly unlikely, and everything we've learned from our federal partners who monitor this, Department of Health, who has an aggressive program on the coast right now monitoring those very things, we don't see that as being a very likely outcome.
So the finds debris on the coast, is it, I mean, can they just take it home as a souvenir, or do you really want them to call it in even if it's just something small?
If it's something small, we prefer, and again, Director Woods could probably speak to that better. His system right now is to collect this material, put it in a bag, and get it in a dumpster at one of his state parks. And that's going to be the first level. If it becomes something large like we have right now, that creates a different set of circumstances, and there were a lot of different species attached to that dock. And in partnership with Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, DEQ, they were able to clean it up, make sure that it's not going to get into our ecosystem, and that's a horse of a different color. We don't want necessarily people taking things home for souvenirs. And in our FAQs and in this diagram and on everybody's website, you'll find responses in there of what to do with certain items that you find, particularly if they look or appear to be something that might be a family heirloom or something that would mean something to a family member. And we've got systems set up to do that. We need to call 211, tell it where it is, get it to somebody either at the parks and or even local government can accept that, and then we'll get it from there and get it re-engaged with the Japanese consulate and make sure that that gets back to the appropriate people.
General, may I follow up just to clarify that? The Parks Department has done Parks and Recreation has done a wonderful job, I think, of updating people on the dock and those things. And one of the things that was said was, if you pick up, excuse me, if you find small things, pick them up, recycle them or whatever, implying that they could take them home. So I just want to make sure you know,
I think our preference,
is, you know,
I'll defer to the director.
as far as ownership and things like that. So I just want to make sure we all understand.
Yeah, I'll defer to Tim, but I think that our preference would be to get it in a garbage sack and get it into a receptacle. You want to answer that?
That's right, General. I think you know, most of what we're finding right now in terms of small items that people are picking up, is a lot of it is styrofoam of all different kinds, and so that doesn't make much of a memento. But it is, you know, and frankly, we'd like to see that stuff in the dumpsters, because that's going to be one of the ways that we use to estimate what our costs are going to be. Hopefully, that we might get some of those reimbursed. So, you know, it's best if they use the dumpsters that we'll provide, or the bags.
But there's no legal issue with somebody picking up something.
No,
They're not going to be arrested for being an Oregonian.
You will not be arrested. I think, as Tim said, there are two issues involved here. One, there are potentially items of personal significance to people in Japan, and obviously we want to make sure we return those. I think the larger question is, I mean, if people want to take styrofoam or a stick home, I guess that's okay. What we're trying to do, though, is use the dumpsters, as Tim said, to measure volume, to figure out sort of what this is going to actually cost the state, because when we get federal resources to come in, there may be a local match required, and we want to be able to document volunteer hours and time and expense to get those federal resources back into the state.
Governor, have you had conversations with the federal government, and what are the chances of getting resources from the federal government to help with this?
We have had conversations with the delegation. I haven't had any direct conversations with the administration yet, but we're going to turn to that very shortly. As the general pointed out, there's a regular and well-defined FEMA process for disasters. We've had plenty of those here, floods and fires. This doesn't fit into those categories because of the length and potential duration of this. So there are resources available. We believe there's a presidential emergency fund, so we're going to exhaust all of our efforts, and we're going to be doing this in conjunction with California, Hawaii, Alaska, and Washington. So there'll be a number of states pushing on this same lever. I'm very confident that we will get federal resources. The question is how soon we can get them in.
I'd like to clarify the word disaster, if I may, General. Governor, if you'd like to weigh in. When referring to this as a disaster, is that because of the terminology for how it's being approached, or are you suggesting this has the potential to overwhelm the beaches? I mean, in a sense, what's the worst case scenario?
Oh, the tonnage, I can't recall the exact tonnage, but it's something on the order of magnitude of 25 million tons, or was it 50 million tons? I can't.
25 million originally.
25 million tons was estimated, came out. The estimate is 70% of that is not going to reach any place other than either stay in the oceans, floating around in what they call the garbage pit of the Pacific, and or it's already sunk. So that volume, if it all hit on the 5 states, would constitute a disaster in any way you look at it. Typically, how you measure disaster is, you know, what did it cost and what was the damage, and then you do a damage assessment, and then the federal government has a scheme where you get X amount of dollars per capita. If you reach that threshold, then you get relief and funds from the federal government, typically on a 75-25, 75% federal, 25% state, to mitigate that. The recent disaster we had this last year just in Marion County, for instance, did meet the threshold for public assistance, which is bridges and other infrastructure, but did not meet the threshold because of those calculations for individuals. So those folks that didn't have flood insurance or any other capability, they're simply can't be helped by the feds. So that's the piece, and as the governor indicated, one of the things they allow in this process is volunteer labor, volunteer help, and we've worked with the non-governmental organizations, solved the other beach groups, and that's going to be key to us calculating our numbers to make sure that whatever threshold they come up with, if they use the typical FEMA threshold or do they come up with something different, we're not certain yet, but we want to capture that information so we can get those numbers to the federal government, and that will meet that threshold that you're talking about.
Is there a danger to property at all, or to people? In some way? I mean, I suppose there could be if you're climbing on stuff.
Well, I think anytime you're dealing with debris, no matter where you find it, there's a danger of getting hurt from it and or picking up some infection or something. That, I mean, the governor probably answered better than I can, being a physician, but I don't think it's wise. I think that's why Director Woods has provided bags, gloves, et cetera, to try to keep that out of the mainstream and not cause that to happen. probably very rare, probably very highly unlikely, but you don't know. I mean, it's been sitting in salt water for over a year, so that would probably indicate that it's fairly sterile, but you just don't know. And I think anytime you're dealing with debris, it's best to, if you can't pick it up and put it in a bag, leave it alone and tell somebody. And we'll get the proper equipment, proper trained people in there to get it off the beach.
What will be the role of
One last question, Dan.
what will be the role of the legislative members? There are at least 7 of them, and the other partners in this task force.
Well, I'm going to let Senator Johnson speak the role of the legislature. I think the other partners are clearly involved, both non-governmental operations. The tribes are involved, and I think all of us are partners in this thing. We all have a stake in the outcome. We all have a stake in how this is going to ultimately be resolved. And I think that brings everybody to the table. We have private industry in the room. We have the whole gamut, because it's our backyard. This is our neighborhood. All 287 miles of that coast is our backyard. So we want to make sure that it's taken care of properly. Senator, would you want to talk about
Well, the only other comment that I would make is that, whoops. Betsy Johnson, for the record. The only other comment that I would add is that I and my coastal colleagues are real-time reporters. We're hearing from our constituents about what they're actually seeing on the beaches and how they're reacting to it, how sufficient is the response. And so we're real-time reporters, but I also think that at some point in time there will be a legislative role in helping to defray some of the costs. Parks has already indicated how deeply they're into their budget with these unforeseen costs. I've had a conversation with the Senate President about legislative participation. There have been no commitments, but certainly I think that there'll be a role in discussing funding as we determine the magnitude of the expense associated with the debris removal.
I think there may be a couple of healthcare questions, so I want to excuse folks and shift to that because we just have a couple more minutes.
I have one question about the tsunami debris. Is there any estimates as to how long this debris may be arriving on our coast?
There really aren't. I mean, we've missed the original estimates were this fall, and obviously the beach arrived a little early. And so the modeling that we have to estimate the trans-Pacific drift is not very well developed. So I think it's really a wide open question.
Could we have any idea, like, what else is out there, what's going to end up showing up on our beaches? If you're going to fly over and see, like, other big
I actually
docks?
haven't done a flyover of the Pacific.
Does anybody know what's out there? Or we just couldn't wait for that?
Yeah, help you out a little bit. I'm Terry Thompson, a commercial fisherman. To answer your question on danger, as the fishing industry and boats at sea have a problem with larger marine debris like the dock. It scares us when we see something like that floating around. They have a potential of loss of equipment and life from that. To answer your question related to what's coming, the first stuff is styrofoam, things that are wind-driven, and then the things that are current-driven, the larger devices that are sunk farther in the water will come behind it. Exactly when it'll get over, John's exactly right.
You haven't seen it, though?
I mean, see it. I pick it up every day when I go fishing. There's a lot of it out there.
What, tires and stuff like that?
Not tires, but styrofoam, there's floats. Right now, like I say, it's wind-driven stuff, things that's high above the water. What's coming behind it will be the stuff that's down in the current that's still floatable. What it'll be.
It could be, I mean, it could be anything. I don't think.
Right, it could be anything.
It could be a house, could be a dock. I don't think anybody knows. An awful, as we said, millions of tons of material were washed into the ocean in the Japanese.
Thank you all so much. I want to make sure these folks can speak.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yes, sir.
Very good. Very good.
Did you guys get these?
Any quick thoughts on healthcare?
It's okay if there aren't.
It seems like under the way the court ruled that Oregon pretty much has a green light to do what it's already set on doing. Do you see any? You probably have more of a chance now to look at the ruling, or at least some of yours.
Yeah, I think the biggest concern we had with the Supreme Court case was really the impact it might have on our health insurance exchange, and secondly, we obviously would lose out on the federal resources to expand the Medicaid program. The latter would not have affected our ability to move forward, but now we have clearly a green light on the health insurance exchange and really on the CCOs, and we believe we'll have a delivery system in place that can absorb between 180,000 200,000 additional Medicaid clients here in 2014.
Governor, you and the health authority made the decision not to distribute as much in as much money to the CCOs as some of them had expected. Was that because of concerns about the court decision, and will you now revisit that decision?
No, I think there might have been a communication issue with the CCOs, but the money's the money. We got $1.2 or $1.9 billion from the federal government, and which we are using to ensure no additional cuts to the people who are organized in CCOs. But there isn't any additional money out there. You know, it's very interesting as you watch this develop. The whole medical industry has operated for decades on a business model that assumes that the government and the private sector will fund an inflation rate twice or 3 times the CPI. And those days have come to an end. I think they came to an end clearly in 2008. I think you're going to see when the federal government has to raise the debt ceiling again to avoid defaulting on our national debt, it'll be very clear that Medicare and Medicaid are driving those costs. So we're entering an era where those kinds of inflation rates are no longer going to be affordable. And the window that has been afforded to the state of Oregon, and it is a remarkable golden opportunity, is we've got a 5-year window to begin to change that delivery system to a new, more efficient way of providing health care. And the federal government has given us resources to help support the system while we do that. But those resources are not going to be available to just prop up the existing system. That's not what they're for.
The one thing that the court did strike down was those Medicaid provisions, and so it allows states to not expand the Medicaid population and not face any sort of a penalty. Do you anticipate that Oregon will expand the Medicaid population?
Well, that'll obviously be a legislative decision, but I anticipate that we will. There's 2 things I think you need to understand about this. If you don't see those people, they go to the emergency room, and we end up paying for, you know, strokes rather than managing blood pressure. So the cost doesn't go away. It's shifted somewhere else in the system. Secondly, the federal government is going to pay the whole tab for at least the first 2 years. So that gives us, again, another little window to absorb these new clients with resources, not general fund resources, these are federal resources, and begin, as we begin to transition into our delivery system. So I would argue we are better positioned than any state in the nation to take advantage of the provisions of the Affordable Care Act.
Would it therefore be, I'm just trying to make sure I understand the court's ruling, would it be therefore correct to say that the part on the Medicaid is essentially irrelevant to Oregon?
That's correct. It says that if a state chooses not to expand the Medicaid program, which we could do, we wouldn't get penalized for it. And our program, you know, the reason to expand the Medicaid program is to get more people into a rational coverage system rather than seeking care through the ED. But our program really can go forward whether we decide to do that or not.
We're developing our own exchange, the computer programming for that, plus the CCO model. Are other states talking to Oregon
well, I think,
copy it, and is Oregon looking to other states to say, what are you doing?
We're pretty far ahead of the pack, I think. We did get a lot of inquiries about how we managed to get almost $2 billion from the federal government. And I think the short answer is we agreed to be accountable for outcomes and for reducing costs. I think we'll see quite a few states looking at our model now that the Affordable Care Act is a reality, not a question mark. And clearly, as I said, it's in the interest of the healthcare industry to begin and to use all the time that they have to begin to redesign their business model to operate in a world of considerably fewer resources.
Do you think that the decision about whether or not to, in fact, expand the Medicaid population depends at all on the November elections legislation?
I'm sorry, the question is?
Do the November elections for the legislature have any bearing? Will that have much of an impact on the decision to expand or not expand the Medicaid
in Oregon?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think so, but I obviously can't predict what the legislature will do, but I think it would be quite surprising if the legislature decided to leave 180,000 people without coverage when the federal government's saying they're willing to pay for them for 2 years. I think that's pretty unlikely, but it's certainly possible.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Tim.